Before we get into talking about your journey, the journey that you've been on to launch Roger from a place of care, from a heart of growth, because you care about the military community. What has been going well for you? What's been good, either personally or professionally? It's your pick to get started.
Oh my goodness. So much goodness. I've had this, we've been working on building a team for the 14 years I've been here. And so to have a team at the bank that is just so growth oriented, has such a growth mindset, but also extremely locally focused, wanting to ensure that we are geographically serving our customers well that have been with us for 122 years, but then also having this mission driven kind of social cause to find the gaps that aren't being served even beyond our geography, to be able to help. That's just been so rewarding. We have a lot of really neat things we do as an organization, and have a team of 55 people that work so hard and put their time and passion towards different projects. That's been really motivating to be around. And then just personally, kids are doing great things, husband's doing great things. So it just can be in a better place, both professionally and personally.
As you mentioned, you have this organization with a growth mindset and it's purpose driven. What do you attribute that to? Because that is the meaning behind having a heart of growth. It's more than just the transaction. It's putting the transformation of people over the commoditized transaction of dollars and cents. What is that more deeply rooted in?
I think it's really kind of two facets for us. The bank is 122 years old and I came whenever I was in trouble. And what was very profound during that time wasn't just the turnaround of the bank's balance sheet and income statement, but more profound than that was the social capital that the bank had built for 122 years, and how our customers were saying you can't fail, and not because they were concerned about their bank account, although they were maybe to some degree, but this bank was so important to the community. And we're in an affluent suburb of Oklahoma City. There's literally 100 banks within a 10-mile radius of us. We're one of the smallest, so you would think it'd be inconsequential whether we existed or not. But the reason that we mattered wasn't so much because of deposits and loans. It was because of the difference this bank has made in the community for generations. And so carrying over that legacy is a really neat torch to carry on. And then getting a team put together that's highly talented, that could work at an organization 100 times our size, but they're motivated in their ability to make an impact. So to be someplace small, you have the ability to have nimbleness in your decision making, your close proximity to problems and opportunities, so you can act quickly and purposely very early and really make a difference in our community. And we've seen that repeat and repeat and repeat. And when you have a staff that's motivated by that, it just creates a culture of this purpose-driven mindset, while ensuring that we're meeting the expectations of the stakeholders in our community and our shareholders and our team. We also, our largest shareholder of our bank is our employee stock ownership program. So the bank is primarily owned by those working in it. And so this extreme ownership kind of mindset permeates who we are, as well as this radical candor that we experience here every day. So everyone has a voice here to help make sure that we're meeting community needs, but that we're also driving the industry forward and creating a pathway for the ability for a small community bank to survive for another 100 years.
I appreciate the perspective of legacy, of where you've been, where you're at, but now it's also where you're looking to go and looking to grow. And that's because this idea of community has transcended physical borders and zip codes. As I mentioned in the introduction, it's also where every hero needs a helpful and empathetic guide to guide them on a hero's journey. Like I said, Luke has Obi-Wan in Star Wars. Daniel's son has Mr. Miyagi in The Karate Kid, and Frodo had Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. And now the military community has Roger, which is the first military-focused digital bank that is owned and operated by Citizens Bank of Edmond. So we have this legacy here, but then we're also writing a new chapter, creating the future, co-creating the future. Before we get too far ahead into this story, why do this? Why build and launch Roger, and why now?
Yeah, and we have a mantra internally, and it comes from the Navy. that if not us, then who? If not now, then when? So when we see a problem, we have this audacity to think, wow, we have the tools to solve this problem. If it's really something we understand well, then this small team of citizens, we believe, can really change the world. And the bank has been uniquely, the composition of our team has been uniquely developed and quite accidentally, likely because there's a veteran leading the team. 20% of us have served or are currently serving in the military. And so we understand this community very well. And so once I started sharing my story personally with some challenges early in my military career and started hearing then even people on our team have similar stories, we started identifying that a problem that has existed for decades hasn't been solved yet. And we have the tools through partnerships and as well as our own expertise to be able to create something very simply that could serve a community that has been somewhat overlooked for the last for decades. And so looking at that entry level soldier, sailor, Marine, airman, and being able to ensure that they're building a strong financial future, but with a bank that really understands them, that's something that we understand that we can implement. And through our partnership with Nimbus, we can provide the top shelf digital experience that age group has come to expect.
You make a very interesting point around story. I just recently did a podcast that stories are what connect and bind people together. And I want to roll the story back here because I like the way that you also frame this. It was built by a group of citizens that are thinking much larger from a heart of growth, from a place of care when it comes to this military community. And it is a community, to your point, that you know very well from personal experience. Take us back to the early days of your military experience and share some of the pain and the challenges that you were experiencing back then as a new recruit. And the reason I want to go here is because I'm a big believer that we can transform pain into power. We can transform past, troubles and challenges into future growth opportunities, which is, I think, what you're doing. But let's roll the clock back. What's the story behind the story?
Yeah. So whenever I was in a really unique family situation growing up, I had a single dad who wasn't supportive of the kids going to college. We were expected to graduate from high school and go straight to work or get married. Lived in a small town in eastern Oklahoma. I really wanted to go to college. So I was working at the local grocery store, saved enough money to pay for my first semester, thought I could continue working at the grocery store and pay for the rest of school. I just couldn't do that. I was always kind of one step behind. He's a great guy. He passed away last year, but he wouldn't provide his financial information to apply for financial aid. I would have easily had been approved for that. But I just kept running out of money. And so I ended up having to come back to my small town and was doing really well in school, but just could not keep up financially, and moved into a storage building behind a house with no electricity or plumbing, and was working at the local grocery store trying to get my feet underneath me again. And was just really in a very, just a really fragile, it seems like a silly word because it was much more extreme than that, financial situation, and just with limited opportunities and what I could do in my future. And so I was carrying groceries out one night, and it happened to be for an Army recruiter who explained that if I enlisted and completed training, that I could then be considered an independent student, and I would be qualified for the GI Bill, as well as could apply for financial aid independently without my parents. And it literally was like heavens opened up and angels started singing, because it gave me a pathway. And this is a story that I have come to know by just hundreds of other veterans and currently serving service members, where the military was a pathway to really more economic freedom, which I think we kind of can take for granted living in the community that I live in now. And so I enlisted. I was an 82 Bravo construction surveyor, went off to basic training. I didn't have a bank account. So I opened a bank account at Citizens Bank of Edmond, where I now work, which is really really an amazing coincidence. And while I was in basic training, your money is direct deposited at the bank, and at that point in time, 30 years ago, you went to like a window and they would give you your substance allowance. So I was basically living on that and letting my bank deposit come to Citizens. And over the course of my basic and AIT and some additional time at the schoolhouse, when I came back home, I thought I had about $15,000 saved up, and a family member took me shopping because the Army gives you lots of carbs. And so I carved up and needed some new clothes. And I wrote a check, and then I got a notice that I was overdrawn in my check account, that the check had cleared, but I was overdrawn that amount that had been covered. And my $15,000 was now a negative amount. I'd also been sold a car that didn't belong to the person. And so I didn't have proper title. So I lost out on that. The car got impounded. It was just a really difficult situation to be in. It was a really close family member that I found had been writing checks on my account the entire time I've been gone. So as a new recruit, you have to give a permanent address. So my checks were going to this permanent address of this family member, and they were then using my checks to write and on the account, and had spent all my money. So I didn't realize I could go to the bank and say that this was a forgery and that they would have to pay me that money back. And so I couldn't go back to the school that I was going to because I didn't have any money. I went down to our local library and got one of those big college books and started calling different colleges to see if anyone would give me a scholarship, and found one in South Texas. At this time now I was in the National Guard, and then was able to get rides all the way down to Keensville, Texas, which is really far from my hometown here in Oklahoma, and started school there. I met my husband that very first day. And so my enlistment experience went through that time period, both going on in base training at IAT and then being on active duty at Fort Leonard Wood, but then going into the National Guard while I was in school, and then got married. My husband got his active duty orders to go to Hawaii. And that's kind of how the story kind of started shifting. But those were my early experiences with the military. That was the financial side of it. From a leadership development piece, being taught the foundation of ethics and leadership and what your responsibilities are as an individual, as part of an organization. That was the biggest leap in my professional development as I look back on my career that I've experienced. So it's an extraordinary opportunity for a rite of passage for a young person, both financially as well as to rise out of poverty and situations in which maybe there aren't a lot of pathways to be able to grow or to develop.
Well, I appreciate this narrative even much more now, because I didn't know that Citizens Bank of Edmond was tied into this earlier. And if I look at the archetype here, there's an archetype in story mythology called voyage and return. And so you really had this voyage and return coming there and then coming back.